Ayi-yu-kwee, nickname Alita, and this is my channel, The Midnight Librarian. And today I will be talking about my review of Robin Wall Kimmerer's Gathering Moss. We're going with the messy top knot bun today because it is warm and I wanted my hair off my neck. So this is what you get. Anyway, so like I said, this is my review of Robin Wall Kimmerer's Gathering Moss, A Natural and Cultural History of Mosses. This is my second Robin Wall Kimmerer book. I will leave links to my first review of Robin Wall Kimmerer's read that I read, which was Braiding Sweetgrass, which was also like a cultural and personal essays. I will link that above and down below. But this one is essentially, it's another nonfiction, but it's essentially if you took one of the personal essays from Robin Wall Kimmerer in Braiding Sweetgrass and expanded it. That is basically what this is. It's relatively short. It's 166 pages. That's including the index. But basically, it's Robin Wall Kimmerer talking about mosses. I listened to this via Libro FM, but this physical copy was gifted to me by a friend of mine, which I so greatly appreciated for my birthday. And I didn't like this as much as I did Braiding Sweetgrass. Braiding Sweetgrass is an overall arching botanical viewpoint, as well as different indigenous cultures from across the United States, including the Pacific Northwest and going into Central and Eastern. So Robin Wall Kimmerer is indigenous. This is Own Voices, and she's also a botanist. Please understand, though, that just because I am also indigenous does not mean that we have similar experiences or anything. Indigenous nations, peoples, and tribes are not monolithic. So just because I'm Yurok and I believe she says what she is, and I always forget. I can't remember, but Robin Wall Kimmerer is from another nation. So we may have similar learnings or teachings, but we each have individual experiences, cultures, and cultural practices. So please note that with any indigenous book, don't assume that we are monolithic whatsoever. Like I said, I listened to this through Libro FM and I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed Robin Wall Kimmerer's narration, but like I said, I don't think it was quite as good as Braiding Sweetgrass. Braiding Sweetgrass did come out later. This was Robin Wall Kimmerer's first book. And I think overall it was just because there was so many scientific jargon within here. Like anytime she talked about any kind of types of different mosses, it was the Latin name. And she'd occasionally reference them as the common name. However, like it was just, I don't know. It was still fun though, don't get me wrong. This was still really fun. I particularly really enjoyed the cultural history of it and how she was looking into the cultural history of mosses. I know that here locally we use a specific type of moss as a pad of sorts. So if any of you have seen our baby baskets, we still use them, but not to the effect of how we used to. So there's a little like cage type thing in the bottom of the baby basket where you would put moss, and that was to catch any of the baby's urine or poop when they did defecate. And I always I remember hearing that and thought it was really gross because I immediately thought that the moss wouldn't soak it up all the way. It would just catch the poop, and then when they peed, they'd like it'd go down your back, because ultimately the baby baskets now we carry them kind of up front, but at the time there was a band pour along our heads as well as our shoulders. And so it just made me think it would run down our backs. But listening to Robin Wall Kimmerer, it made so much more sense in that I didn't know that mosses could essentially soak up like so much of their own body weight within water. I think it was like 20,000, like 2,000 times as much water as something crazy like that. So it made much more sense to me. I also just appreciated like when she was looking into the cultural history of mosses, that she really had to dig, because when settlers and colonizers came over, it was mostly men looking at the men of our tribes and nations and peoples. They weren't paying attention to the women because it wasn't as significant or whatever. But she did end up finding, I loved her, like her process, and that she did eventually end up coming and finding that mosses were used for diapers, but they were also used for pads for women during their menstruation cycle or their moon cycle, as some of us have called it. So it's really cool that like here on the Pacific, in the Pacific Northwest, we have a similar usage for moss as they did in, well, it's not, it's Robin Wall Kimmerer's tribe, and I can't remember what it is. Hold on. Potawatomi. That's what she is. I love like her topic and subject of, I'm going to say this wrong, reciprocity. Basically, reciprocity. Basically where the plants help us, we help the plants. Yeah, it was just really fun to hear some of the uses of the plants. And specifically, I think Robin Wall Kimmerer had talked about reciprocity. I'm saying that wrong, I know it. How she was actually taught that plants tend to show up, or something tends to show up when you need it most. And so there was, I think, some medicinal uses maybe of mosses. I could be wrong. She could have mentioned that something else within this book, and I'm just connecting it to mosses because this book is about mosses. But it was just really interesting to hear that something here locally, such as using moss as a sort of diaper, would also have been used as a diaper and as a pad during in for the Potawatomi. So that was pretty cool. I'm also just curious, like, what type of mosses. I know she went into it, like, into the Latin names, but that tends to go over my head. I don't know what they look like. It's hard for me to distinguish, and she did a lot of that in terms of distinguishing it by their scientific names, their scientific anatomy, with the overall thing of, like, they kind of look like carpet, which is great. They do. But at the same time, like, the only moss that I can come up with off the top of my head is wolf moss, which is actually in Shasta County, and we use that as well. But we use that to turn porcupine quills yellow for a specific headdress that we use. So I would not assume that wolf moss would also be used as a diaper for a baby or something. So I kind of wanted to get more into that as opposed to the scientific jargon. I wanted to get more into the cultural aspects of it. Not to say that what I got wasn't fantastic, it was, but that's just how I kind of felt about it. Otherwise, it was just really interesting to hear some of the aspects of mosses. For instance, if we want to figure out how, like, for instance, if we're particularly worried about climate change, which I know I particularly am, to look at mosses that are growing on trees, or like the fact that mosses can and will grow in urban areas, such as statues or our buildings, and that we can look to them when it comes to pollution because they're the first to kind of go away. So to be able to, like, go onto my university campus and see mosses like flourishing was like just relaxing, a little comforting, if that makes sense. So yeah. So yeah, it was a relatively short book. Hopefully I didn't give too much away of it. It was ultimately really fun, especially when it came into finding out like Robin Wall Kimmerer's research in mosses and her different studies. I particularly really enjoyed that, particularly when it mentioned banana slugs, mostly because that's really common around here. I also didn't know that Robin Wall Kimmerer had taught up in Oregon, so that's really cool. So yeah, it was just fun. I think I'm very much like a Robin Wall Kimmerer fangirl. She's definitely an author that I will keep my eye out for more books. She does have some, but it looks like a lot of it is like translated works of Braiding Sweetgrass, as well as it looks like anthologies, or like just not anthologies, but like scientific papers. So, which can also be interesting. I just feel like this is more relatable narration, more relaxed as opposed to a scholarly paper. So yeah, if you've read Gathering Moss, I would love to hear your thoughts down in the description down below. If you are interested in picking it up, let me know that as well. I'm always curious. If you've made it this far in the video, be sure to give it a thumbs up. Hit the subscribe button if you have yet to do so already, and the little bell icon to get notified when I post more content. Be sure to look at my raise awareness links down in the description down below as well. And I hope that you are in the mental mindset to enjoy your reading. I will see you in my next video very soon. Ciao!